Hey. So today we're going to be seeing if we can go from having nothing set up to production ELT pipeline in 5 minutes or less with Orchestra. Now, why are we doing this? Well, there's still a lot of data teams out there that either aren't that comfortable with their orchestration or they don't use any at all and just jump around between the various tools. So this is just to show you quite how quickly you can get up and running and reap some of the benefits of having an orchestrator with very, very little effort. So for this example, I'm actually going to use a pretty common one of I have a 5-tran ingestion connector set up, and it's pulling some data from Google Sheets to Mother Duck in this case, but it could be from anywhere to anywhere. I also have a small DBT project, nothing fancy about it, that I would quite like to run on top of that data in Mother Duck. And usually what this looks like for some teams is they have 5-tran running over here, DBT running somewhere else, and somebody comes in the morning, checks 5-tran for errors, they check DBT for errors, and then they try and match them up kind of manually, or they just kind of know how they match up. And then they post this to a Slack channel for people to go and debug or look into. And that's fine, but it's not all that effective. And orchestrators are a great way of having this single view on everything that's going on in your data real estate. So with that, let's see how easy it is to set up. The only other thing I've prepared is a small file which contains the secrets, i.e. passwords and credentials I'm going to use, which I'm obviously not going to show you for obvious reasons. So let's get going. First of all, we're going to come into the docs and just click try it now and sign up for a new Orchestra account. Now I'm going to sign in with Google because it's nice and easy, but you can use whichever you prefer. And within a few seconds, we have a brand new Orchestra account, which we can get going with. So where do I start? Well, first of all, I'm going to want to be able to connect to 5-tran and DBT. So if I come over into integrations, I can start setting these up. So Orchestra has a bunch of pre-built integrations, and I can see right at the top here, the two that I want are right there because they're pretty common. So if I call my 5-tran connector something like 5-tran production, because it's my production one, then I'm just going to paste in the API key and secret from my pre-prepared text file. Once those are populated, I can just add them in and all good. Then I'm just going to do the same thing, but for DBT core. So DBT core production, and I'm just going to put in the repo that's in, and then I'm just going to upload my profiles.yaml just as it was when I was working locally or elsewhere. Then again, I'm just going to click add credentials and we're all set up. So it looks like we have 5-tran and DBT connected and we can start building a pipeline. So if we jump over into the pipelines view and click new pipeline, let's call this something like ELT daily because that's all it's going to be. So this is the pipeline builder page. First of all, I'm going to think about when I want this pipeline to run. So it's called ELT daily. So I'm just going to set a basic cron trigger that runs this at 9 a.m. every morning. Now I can start thinking about what goes into my pipeline. So I would like to run my 5-tran connector. So if I add a task for 5-tran, I call this something like ingest and pick the connector that I would like to schedule. Then if I go down to optional parameters, I'm just going to select the connection that we just set up. This is what tells Orchestra which set of credentials to use for this particular 5-tran task. So the ones I just added, but you could similarly use a completely different 5-tran deployment in the same pipeline. Similarly, I'm just going to add in a DBT core task. So if I call this something like transform, and I'm just going to run DBT build so that everything is covered. This particular one is set up with UV. And again, I'm going to come down into the optional parameters and choose the connection that we just set up. Once that's all good to go, I'm going to click next. And as you can see, we already have a fairly standard looking pipeline, but that's not really production level at this point. So let's add some alerts in as well. So if anything goes wrong, we're going to know that this pipeline has failed before I even come and start looking at Fivetran and DBT logs. So if I give this a name of something like ELT failed, and I'm going to set it for just failures on the pipeline as a whole. And we're going to send this to my email because then I'll be able to read it before I even open my laptop. So put my email address in here. And there we are. We even have a pipeline alert set up. So now let's just save this into Orchestra and we can run it and see how it goes. Cool. So let's kick that off and we'll come back in a minute and see what's happened. And there we go. In just a few minutes, we've set up and run end to end our entire ELT pipeline. Now, unfortunately, this has failed for me, but because I've run it in an orchestrator, I can just dig straight into what the issue is. So I could jump in here and look at the details, or I can actually expand my DBT run and immediately see that it's my aggregation layer that's caused me trouble here. I didn't have to trace back in a different platform. If Fivetran had failed, I could have seen that right over here. I was emailed an alert to know that this pipeline had failed this morning, and all of that was in just a few minutes. So give this a go. I know it took me less than 5 minutes, but I'm sure it will take you less than 5 minutes too, even if I am a bit more practiced. And you're able to go from having disparate systems with no real monitoring to a production grade ELT pipeline, fully monitored and robustly integrated with all your different tools in just a few minutes. So definitely worth doing. Give it a go and let me know what you think. Thanks.